On a narrow triangle of ground at the edge of Hastings, a quiet lane runs between two kinds of water. On one side lies a calm, reedy lake. On the other, hidden behind a wall of cottonwoods, rolls the Mississippi. It looks like a simple riverside park, but almost nothing here is simple. We are on the eastern edge of Hastings, Minnesota, a river town in Dakota County where three rivers nearly meet. Just upstream, the Vermilion and the St. Croix join the Mississippi, and the park is a rough triangle of floodplain wedged between the Great River, the shallow curve of Lake Rebecca, and a long flood dike beside Lock and Dam No. 2. That shallow lake holds the park's first secret. Lake Rebecca is not really a lake at all. It is an abandoned channel of the Mississippi itself, a stretch of old riverbed the current wandered away from and left behind. The river never fully let it go. In high water, it still climbs the bank and floods back into its former path. Because the Great River keeps reclaiming it, the lake behaves like moving water. It is full of the fish you would expect in a river current rather than a still pond, and its level rises and falls with the Mississippi's moods. It is a living piece of the river, briefly set aside, but never truly separate. The broad, steep-sided valley around us is far too big for the river that runs in it today. It was cut at the end of the last ice age by a colossal torrent of glacial meltwater, the River Warren, which drained a vast ice-dammed lake and tore this trench across the land in a few violent centuries. The Mississippi we see now is a modest stream flowing through a canyon, a giant left behind. This is confluence country. Within a few miles, the clear Vermilion and the wild St. Croix both surrender their waters to the Mississippi, and the combined river swings past these bluffs greatly enlarged. For as long as people have lived here, these meeting waters have been a crossroads, a larder, and a highway all at once. Long before it was a county, this was Dakota homeland. The Dakota call this country Mni Sota Makoce, the land where the waters reflect the skies. The Mdewakanton, the people of Spirit Lake, kept their villages, gardens, and burial grounds along these rivers, and the confluence country was not wilderness but home. This bend of the Mississippi lay within the world of Kaposia, the Mdewakanton village led by a line of chiefs known as Little Crow. Their people moved along the river with the seasons, and this stretch of water and woods was part of their hunting and fishing ground, rich with waterfowl, fish, and wild rice. The first newcomer to plant himself here was not a farmer but a fur trader. Alexis Bailey, a French-Canadian dealer in furs, ran a trading post on this riverbank while Minnesota was still raw frontier. It was a place of canoes and bundled pelts, where the wealth of the North Woods was bartered and shipped downriver. In 1853, 4 proprietors laid out a town on the site, among them Henry Hastings Sibley, the fur company man who would become Minnesota's first state governor. The story goes that the founders could not agree on a name, so each wrote one on a slip of paper and drew from a hat. The slip that came out carried Sibley's own middle name, and so the town became Hastings. The young town lived and breathed by the river. Steamboats crowded its levee, unloading settlers and goods and carrying away the harvest. And for a time, Hastings was a busy port on the highway of the upper Mississippi. The whistle of a paddle wheeler was the sound of the outside world arriving at the edge of the frontier. Where the Vermilion River tumbled over its falls, mills rose to grind the surrounding prairie's wheat into flour, and the prophets built a town of brick storefronts and river mansions. Grain, lumber, and passengers all moved through this port, and the wealth of a whole farming region flowed down to the water past this very shore. Hastings once boasted one of the strangest bridges in America. To fit a river crossing into a cramped downtown, engineers in 1895 built a corkscrew, a bridge that spiraled down in a full loop to reach the street below. For 60 years, the spiral bridge was the town's beloved landmark, a curl of iron over the Mississippi, remembered long after it was finally taken down. The little lake got its own name from those early days. It was called Lake Rebecca for Rebecca Allison, the daughter of one of the area's early settler families. It is an easy detail to walk past, but it is a reminder that every feature here, even a leftover scrap of old riverbed, was claimed and labeled by the newcomers who reshaped this valley. Then the river itself was engineered. To keep barges moving in every season, the government built a staircase of locks and dams up the upper Mississippi. Lock and Dam Number 2, just off the park's north edge, was begun in 1927 and opened in 1931. Its gates raised the water into a dependable 9-foot channel, and the long dike beside the road is part of holding that tamed river back. For much of the 20th century, this triangle of ground was anything but a park. It was worked first as cropland, and then it became an industrial riverfront, a tank farm where rows of tall steel cylinders stored petroleum beside the water. The same shoreline that had carried canoes and steamboats now served pipelines and pumps. The turn came in 1995. The petroleum tanks were dismantled and hauled away, and the cleared land was donated to the city of Hastings. Working with the Army Corps of Engineers, the city chose to make it wild again. Around 2003, the real healing began, reopening the ground to the river's floods and seeding floodplain forest, wetland, and prairie where the tanks had stood. Today, the reward is all around us. This is prime Mississippi flyway country, where bald eagles nest in the cottonwoods and herons stalk the shallows of Lake Rebecca. Migrating ducks, geese, pelicans, and songbirds pour through in spring and fall, drawn to the very backwaters the river left behind. A place that was once a field of oil tanks now breathes with the river again. A glacial flood carved the valley. The Dakota called it home. A trader, then a town drawn from a hat, then steamboats, mills, a spiral bridge, locks, and oil tanks all took their turn on this ground, before a later generation chose to give it back to the water that made it. Thank you for watching. Follow for more interesting people, places, and things we cover on the channel.